Hey boys and girls, welcome back. Today I'm going to read you a story called Dr. King's Memorial, and it's a story talking about Dr. Martin Luther King and a memorial, which is this picture here we see, which was something that was built for him because of all the great work he did to try and make our country a better place. Our focus question says, who was Dr. King and why is he important? And before we get started, I do want to explain one thing, that when I say Dr. King, right, we call him Dr. King or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was not a doctor like that works at a hospital. So, if you're injured or hurt or sick, you might go see the doctor. He was not that type of doctor. He was a doctor of religions, like a doctor that someone who knows a lot about religion and church and things like that. Some words to know: fair, laws, marched, memorial, peaceful, and separate. Here we have our table of contents with our different page numbers and our different headings for each page. Introduction. A memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is in Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. And this picture here, this is the statue, the memorial to him, where people can come visit and see. Who was Dr. King? Why do we remember him? And our caption says, many people watch as Dr. King gives a speech about equality. So I'm sure a lot of you know who he is and you may have read about him. But just to make sure we understand, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was someone who lived long ago, and he lived during a time where people were not treated equally. If your skin was a different color, if it was black or brown, you were not treated fairly or equally. And he was working really hard to try and change the laws, to try and make them equal for all people. And so he gave lots of speeches and marched a lot, trying to get everyone to see what he was saying and understand what he was saying, so that everyone, no matter what you look like, would be treated the same and have equal rights. And an important quote that he said was, "The time is always right to do what is right," meaning you don't need to wait to do something if you think it's right. If it's the right thing to do, you should do it now. The South. Dr. King grew up in the South in the 1930s. Many laws in the South at that time were not fair to black people. So when we say the South, we're talking about the southern part of the United States. And during this time, which is like a little less than 100 years ago, they actually had laws that treated people differently depending on how they looked. And a lot of these laws were not fair to people who were black. Laws kept black people and white people separate. White children and black children went to different schools. So this is something called segregation. It's a long word that maybe you've heard before. But if you were white and you were black, you would be separated. You would go to different places. So different schools, different restaurants, different libraries, different parks, different bathrooms, different movie theaters. And you can see in the picture here, it says up top, for colored only. So they called them colored people, which we don't say nowadays. It's a very mean and rude thing to say. But back then, these were the actual laws that depending on what you looked like, you could only go to certain places. Black people had to sit at the backs of city buses. The front seats were for white people. So they also had segregation on the buses, where if you were black, you could only sit in the back. And if all the seats were filled and a white person needed a seat, you would have to stand up and give up your seat to them. Dr. King's work. Dr. King wanted the unfair laws to change. He talked to many people about how to change the laws. So during this time, he knew that what was going on was not right, and it was not fair to him and his family. So he worked with many people and tried to get the laws changed so that no matter what you look like, you would have equal opportunity. He wasn't trying to get things better for black people than white people. He wanted everyone, whether you were white, whether you were black, he just wanted equality. Dr. King wanted to use peaceful ways to make changes. He said there was already too much hate in the world. So to help try and get these laws changed, some people wanted to fight back and maybe injure people and hurt people and damage things. He didn't want that. He wanted to do it all peacefully. He said there's already so much hate in the world. There's already so much violence. We don't need more of it. We need to use peaceful ways and to learn to love each other, and that will get things to become better. Dr. King marched with many people. They marched to say no to unfair laws. Dr. King worked with many people to get the laws changed. So this is one of his protests up top where he's going on a march with people with signs trying to get equality, equalness for all people. And it's important to understand that in his work, he did work with many people who were white. So I don't want you to think that during this time, everyone who was white hated everyone who was black. That's not how it worked. There were definitely some people who did not like people that were black, and they liked things the way they were. They wanted people to be separate. But there were also many white people who were friends with Martin and wanted to work with him and wanted to change the laws. New laws. The laws changed in 1964. The new laws are much fairer. It is now against the law to treat some people better than other people. So this picture here is really important. The man sitting down with the glasses is Lyndon Johnson. He was the president long ago. And he signed a bill, right, like a piece of paper, a law, that made it illegal to treat people differently because of the way they look. So whether you were white or whether you were black, it was not allowed to treat them differently because of the way they looked. Black children and white children can go to the same schools. People of every color can sit where they want on the buses. So they got rid of segregation. They said, we're no longer having white schools and black schools, white seats and black seats, white restaurants and black restaurants. No matter what you look like, you can go to the same school, you can go to the same restaurants, you can sit wherever you want on the bus. This woman on the bottom, she's also a very famous person. Her name was Rosa Parks, and when they were having the segregation on the buses, she was one of the people who refused to give up her seat on the bus. They told her to stand up and give up her seat to a white person, and she refused. She said no. And because of that, she got arrested. And a lot of people came to support her, and her courage, by not being afraid, helped change the laws. Dr. King's dream. Dr. King wanted all people to be free. He wanted the laws to be fair for everyone. He dreamed that people of every color would get along. So again, it's important to understand that he wasn't just fighting only for black people. Okay, he wanted equalness for all people. Black, white, rich, poor, it didn't matter. He wanted everyone to have the same opportunities no matter what you looked like, no matter how much money you had, and no matter where you lived. And this is one of his most famous speeches in Washington, D.C., where you can see all these people listening to him speak. We remember Dr. King when we visit the memorial in Washington, D.C. We remember his dream of fair laws and free people. We carry on the work that Dr. King began. So he did pass away. He did die a long time ago. But that's why they're saying we carry on the work that he began. So when he died, people didn't just stop fighting and go back to the way things used to be. People kept working and fighting, and people are still doing that today, trying to make things equal for all people. So that is the end of our story. I'm hoping for a lot of you that you had already knew some of this information that I read. I'm hoping that you learned about him in school and maybe read about him or watched videos about him. But if you learned some new things, that's great as well. Again, it's important to remember all of the work he did and how he sacrificed his life for other people to try and make our world a better place. And it's important that we continue and we remember the great work that he did, and we do our best to try and make our world the best it can by treating everyone equally and just being a good person. So thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed the story. Have a great rest of your day, and stop back tomorrow for another one.